Sugihantu and good evening to ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Dhamma Dana series brought to you by Buddhist Mahavihara Malaysia. Today's session is also live on TBCM FB. Do subscribe to our FB for more information. The topic for tonight is How to See the Buddha, Part 3 by Dr. Gamini from UK. A brief background about Dr. Gamini. Dr. Gamini comes from a very respectable family and he had education at Ananda College, which is a premier Buddhist school. He excelled in studies and sports. He then furthered his studies in England, specializing in medicine. In medical faculty, he also excelled in both academic and sports. He passed all his exams with flying colors and worked as a consultant physician. Now he dedicates his life in conducting talks and discussion on Buddha Dharma, where he promotes the original Buddha doctrine. Dr. Gamini does everything not as a professional or for any pecuniary reason. He dedicates his life in spreading the truth without charging fee or expecting any remuneration. Without further ado, let's welcome Dr. Gamini to join us in our live session. Hi, good evening, Dr. Gamini. Welcome to our Dhamma series tonight. I'll hand over the stage to you now.
Hello, good evening, good afternoon to everybody else in the world. Thank you very much for inviting me again to this discussion. In the last three discussions, we managed to have a brief introduction of the path to seeing Buddha. It's very important that those listeners grasp all the steps in detail so that they will automatically fall into the path by mere understanding of the path to Nibbana. So in the last few discussions, I will recap what I mentioned, that the Buddha is not a person, it's a state that we are all born with inside our bodies. So if somebody asks you, where was Buddha born and when was Buddha born, the state was born with you inside your body. So your Dhamma, Buddha, and the eye of Prajna, which will see Dhamma and Buddha, they are all inside your body, or inside your physical body. So the notion of Buddha as a person is something that has come down the generations through religions, including Buddhism. That's when you look at it through your five senses, you will know only things that you see or touch or hear. So in the same way, the notion of a Buddha being a person has come down the generations to denote and has become an icon for worship. As we can't see the live Buddha, well, we have various statues and then we worship uh, that kind of thing. But actually, that is what, when you consider everything through your five senses and the mind, but actually what Tathagata, or what we call Buddha, he himself called Tathagata, he never called himself Buddha, but he attained Buddhahood. That's a state. So what we want to find out is where this state of Buddhahood, and try and see whether we can get there and we can also achieve the same state of affairs. And by being, uh, by concentrating Buddha as a person, we will never get to the state we are looking forward to reach. So that's the first thing. Bud means knowledge. Tha means from within. It's a knowledge from within. It's actually knowledge is a word that we use in our day-to-day terms as some things that we understand and we assimilate. But when it gets to the level of Buddha, it is not that kind of knowledge. It's different. But at this moment, we will just consider it as knowledge. Now, the next thing word that we came across was Dhamma. Dhamma is the way it is, the way the nature is, the building blocks of nature. Now, in modern science, we have gone right down to electrons, protons, and so on. These building blocks of nature are much further, a million times further away. And if you keep dividing and subdividing these uh, structures, at the end you come to a stage where you actually get to the stage where that particle or the tiniest physical element that cannot be divided any further. And that's the state of Dhamma, and actually it consists of knowledge. So all of us and everything around us in the universe are made of Dhamma. And the character of Dhamma is they arise and cease. This knowledge arises and ceases and is not connected to the next arising and ceasing. So this goes on and on and on, and our five senses perceive this as a body or a person or a physical structure. But inside that, the activity inside, if we go right to the bottom of it, you will find that it is actually knowledge, information that arises and ceases. In this particular case, it's a collection of information. And the collection of information with the eye of prajna you will see as a particle, a tiny particle. But if you are capable of dividing this tiny particle, Dhamma, and then the pure knowledge will arise, and that's what we call Buddha. So the whole universe is actually made of Buddha and Dhamma, and this is called Buddha Dhamma in various languages, also called Buddha and Dhamma. It's also called reality. Dhamma is called reality and beyond reality. Dhamma is also called Yathartha. Yathartha means the way it is. And Buddha is called Paramartha, that means the ultimate way it is, that is ultimate truth. So Buddha and Dhamma are considered the truth of nature. So remember, our aim is to find the truth, and this truth is actually Dhamma and Buddha. First you come across Dhamma and then Buddha. Now this is not the way the religions teach you. It is something different. Buddha as a person, Dhamma as preachings written in books. But you have to get away from that notion if you want really to achieve the state where one can see Dhamma and Buddha. And actually at that time, the one which sees Dhamma and Buddha is not you, it is the eye of prajna. The eye of prajna also has no physical structure, it is just seeing. That is why we call it seeing Buddha and seeing Dhamma. There is no person at the time seeing, it's only a notion of a I within, sort of inverted commas. It sees, but there is no physical structure. What sees these phenomena? It's like seeing a dream, and you don't know where what is seeing. It's not your eyes certainly, but there is a seeing when you see a dream, and just like that. I have taken that as an example because that's the easiest one. Everybody has had dreams in their life, so he knows, you know what it is. So, in the last talks, we described the difference between a religion and the seeing Buddha and Dhamma. Remember, philosophy also comes on the side of religion, because philosophy is also, and religion both are derived from thinking. and the basis of those is thinking, and it's the mind that creates the philosophy as well. So, on the other side of mind, thinking, philosophy, and religion, the opposite side is the seeing of Dhamma and Buddha. So, it's completely different directions we have to go through to achieve so-called achieve nirvana or nibbana, and nibbana is a state within the uh, Buddha state. So last time I explained how an illusion is formed, why Dhamma and Buddha cannot be seen the way we are now. When the mind is active, when you are awake, when the five senses are active, unfortunately, we get information not from within but from outside, because these five senses are focused to outside, and that outside and inside are limited by where the sense organs are. So, so away outside the sense organs we call exterior, and inside the sense organ we call interior, and that is an illusion created by the mind. So we continue to interact between outside and inside. Information transfers from outside to inside and then from inside to outside. So this exchange of information during this process, we fall into the trap of believing, which is also part of the function of the mind, believing that there is outside, that there is inside. When actually outside, inside are exactly the same. But we cannot perceive it that way when the mind is active and the sense organs are active, because it always shows two different parameters of outside and inside, and then we get lost in that. So we fail to realize there is something more important within us, inside. And it is this knowledge that is coming from inside that we call Buddha and Dhamma. So if one wants to see, or one, I say one, this is the prajna eye, want to see Buddha and Dhamma, we need to open up inside. So to open up inside, we have to shut down the outside. And that means we have to stop the activity of the mind which creates this illusion of outside and inside. So that is the essence of the beginning of the path towards Nibbana, and it is also mentioned in the sutras. Not that all the sutras are all accurate, there have been various changes to that over a period of time, and this particular one has somehow existed and remained without being altered, and it's in uh, Ratana Sutra. It's called Ye Suppayutta Manasa Dalhena Nekkamino Gotama Sasanam. That means this tightly bound mind, tightly bound to what? To the body, physical body. Leaving it behind, that is what is called nekkam. It's leaving behind, relinquish it, is the Gautama message. And that is the message of the Tathagata, is to leave behind the mind. And that for some people is very surprising, because all this time, all our lives, the mind has helped us to perform our lives, to carry on with our lives, and now somebody is coming here and telling us to stop the activity of the mind and leave it behind. Now, the reason why it is said like that is when you leave behind the mind, a lot of people don't realize that another new system arises within our body called chitta. It's called chitta. That is a separate system, completely different to mind. Activities are different. Exchange of information process is different, and it's much more efficient than the mind. And now, when you leave chitta, you will find that the next one that arises, which is called prajna, It's even more efficient, has more knowledge, and is capable of extracting knowledge from inside. And then finally, you have to even leave prajna to attain the state of Buddha and to see Buddhahood. So you can see that there are various stages that are inherent and is available right now in your own within your own bodies, but we seem to have got stuck in the lowest one, which is the mind. And remember that all religions praise the mind because there is nothing more than the mind for religions. Because religions are created by the mind, and therefore the mind is the greatest for them. But in Buddha Darshana or seeing Buddha, mind is the lowest level, and there are much higher levels of intelligence at different levels, and we have to move step by step to the final state of intelligence at the level of Buddha. So, in the first step, we call stream entry. What we do is to relinquish the mind, leave the mind behind, stop the activity of the mind, which results in the disappearance of the external and internal divisions, your environment and yourself. So from exterior and interior concept is lost, and then the new thing arises within, which will see the inside only. That is for temporary, for a little while, for a momentary thing, which will bring a lot of information during that moment from the information deposited in these so-called tiny particles that I mentioned, which we call Dhamma. So the knowledge from Dhamma is obtained by relinquishing and leaving behind the activity of the mind. So to do that, we need to understand what the mind is. We need to understand how the mind works. We need to understand how the information travels in the system and how the mind come to conclusions, and what does this conclusion actually result in once you made uh, using the collection of information once you made a decision. So let's go into that, and that is what I tried to describe last time in a brief summary form. I mentioned that we need to understand the physical body first, what it contains, and then understand what comes from the environment. The information comes from the environment, in this instance, um, through light or sound or touch, some information about an object outside, and then it falls into your mind, and then it uses the memory to identify the object, and then come to a conclusion or a decision as to what it is. So that exchange of information consists of a part outside and a part inside, right? So inside we call, as I said, in this system, something which is inside the sense organs, and everything else is outside the sense organs. So let's go a little bit more detail into the structure of the physical body, so that we understand all the parts within our bodies inside the sense organs. The boundary between outside and inside is the sense organ, where it is focused outside. So these sense organs can't read anything inside because they are focused towards outside. So therefore, we need to understand the system, what happens to actually break that tradition system, information transfer mechanism, to understand the details of it. So let's take the body. We divide that body into three locus, three L-O-K-A, three locus. Loka means a space, three spaces. And these three spaces work in unison within the same outside boundary, within the same boundary, limited by these sense organs. The first is the physical body, which I said was consist of, at the end when you keep dividing and subdividing, ultimately you come to the finest particle that cannot be divided any further. If you divide this particle any further, then the particle disappears. So that state is called Dhamma, and that state contains collection of information, and the Prajna eye sees that during seeing Buddha, during the vision, it sees as a tiny particle that arises and sees, but it is actually a collection of information. So whether it's your arm or the body or the nose or the eye or the head, at the end, when you go right down to the bottom of building blocks of this, they are the same. They contain information. So that is Dhamma, that's the physical body. Then you have the mind, which occupies the same space all over the body and also consists of these tiny particles that arise and cease. But I said in the last discussion that the speed at which these arise and cease is much faster, higher than the speed of light in the mind, whereas in the body is lower than the speed of light. So therefore, the eye, which can perceive the speed of light, can see this as a solid object, whereas the mind cannot be seen. And you know there's something that's acting behind this body, because when it says raise your hand, then you raise your hand, because there's somebody who's giving instructions from the body, from behind the body, and it works like that. So that space is called the mind, and that cannot be seen or touched, or that have no access to equipment that has been made using the thought process, using the mind, like scientific equipment. And therefore scientists have not been able to locate the mind. And in religions, particularly in Abhidhamma is actually not Buddha version. It's written 250 years after the death of Buddha, and in that it states that the mind is located in the heart. And nowadays there are people doing heart transplants, so you'll understand that if you take the heart away, you take the mind away as well. But it hasn't happened. It's the same person who wakes up with the new heart, with the same mind. So it's actually not true that the mind is located inside the heart. Now, to deviate from that uh, notion, people have suggested that it is in the blood of the heart, but this blood keeps circulating all over. So then it must be all over the body as well. But remember, the body consists of parts, that the blood doesn't circulate like the thick part of the bone, but mind is there everywhere, from your head to toe, everywhere, and it is a form of tiny little particles that arise and cease much higher than the speed of light. So these two speeds of particles that arise and cease are attracted together by another space that is found all over the body. These three spaces work in unison inside the space of what we call the interior environment, and that is called tanha. Tanha is translated into English as craving and passion and so on. They are totally words derived from the mind and indicating, denoting that craving is outside, is not within the body. Uh, you crave or you have some kind of liking to a object outside is called craving, and that's what the religions say. But it is not actually craving. Is not cannot be uh, used in this situation. It should be called tanha. It's an attraction. It's like two magnets brought together. There's nothing, no particles inside, but there's an attraction between the two magnets. So this tanha attracts the body and the mind in a very peculiar way, because it has two different levels, speeds. of particles, this is capable of holding them together. And in fact, it is this tanha that holds the particles at two different levels of speed. So if tanha becomes weak, the, the faster speed will become slower, and the slower speed of the physical body becomes higher. So tanha is the one that keeps these three spaces going, and therefore they are called three loka. Three means number three, three items, three spaces, and these three spaces work together in unison to form thoughts, opinions, identifications, and so on. So these three spaces must be learned to know exactly what is happening in the body. In the physical body side, we have these particles have come together to form organs, sense organs. And then sense organs bring in information and pass them on through a system, through the nerves into the brain. And the brain, which is part of the physical body, then communicates with the mind. By projecting that information into the mind, so that the mind can understand, so the mind can perceive this information at a level, at a speed higher than the physical body. And that's what it does. It elevates the speed of this information that comes and projects into the mind, the space of the mind, and then the mind can understand what it is. And then mind starts its own process to identify this from the memory, which is part of the physical body again. So it has to send the information back to the physical body to identify it. So this process is called dukkha. It's divided into five functions or five activities. They are called rupa, vedi, sanya, sankhya, and vinyana. So finally, at the vinyana level, the mind wakes up. So an image comes through, information comes through, knocks on the door of the mind, say, wake up, I've come. And then the mind wakes up, and that's called vijnana. But it does not know whether it came from the ear or the eye or touch or nose or a taste. It can't identify it because it has no memory. It only wakes up, and that is called vijnana. Now in Buddhism, in the religion called Buddhism, vijnana is defined as knowing, knowledge. But it is not so. It's actually just wakes up. For it to know, it has to ask the memory, which is again part of the brain, to identify what this image is. And then the brain will pick up, like sorting out things from a hard disk, will open all the drawers up and say that, oh, we have stored an image like this and it is called a tree. And always in the memory, you store with a name attached to it. And this is called Nama Rupa in Buddha Darshana. Now in religion, Buddhism, Nama Rupa is something different. We call the Nama for the mind and Rupa for the body. So don't get confused with that. Nama is a name given to a Rupa, an image of an object outside. So that system sends the information back to the mind. Unfortunately, when you store Nama and Rupa in the memory, it links Nama and Rupa. Let's say, for example, like if you take a balance and the rod between the two baskets of the balance, and that is what we call me. I know that this is this name and this Rupa. You join them by the notion of I or me. So that is stored like a balance with the two baskets and me together in your memory. So when the mind asks the memory what it is, the whole lot of information, all those three informations, Nama, Rupa, and me all come together to the mind. So the mind interprets it as I saw a tree, I saw the tree, or I heard the noise. So it's always every thought, and that is what you call a thought. When you identify an object, that's the simplest thought, and every object is identified as me or I identify it. So every thought has the notion of me inside it. So as long as you have this thought, you will see or hear sounds outside. And although this image falls in your mind inside, you don't realize it's inside. Because the mind, what is the illusion that it creates, it projects it again to outside of your body, and it indicates that this image is not inside but it is outside. And that is the illusion mind creates. So you see the tree outside. Actually, the tree didn't come into your mind. It's an image of the tree that came into your mind, and it projects it back to outside, and it says, right, that there is a tree outside. So that is an illusion that's created by the mind. So you live, you immerse in this, let's say, in this river of illusions, and interact with outside all the time. But everything that you perceive, from your eyes, from your ears, from your tongues, from your skin, the touch, and so on, are all images that fall in your mind, which is inside. So your body is actually consists of full of images, but you don't see it that way, perceive it that way. You see them as if they fall outside. They are all outside, not within inside. That's the illusion it creates. So you keep interacting with the outside all the time, and then you forget the hidden things that is inside, the most important things, prajna, dhamma, and buddha. So that is the illusion it creates to hide it, conceive it from you, right, and steal it and hides it somewhere so that you cannot access that. So that is the reason, that's the very reason that you need to make the mind inactive to prevent this happening. So one other thing that happens, that in fact the most important thing that happens in this process, is the thought that you get. For example, I saw the tree. That thought nourishes tanha. It makes tanha even bind the body and the mind firmer, harder together. And that's called upadana. That means bringing together. The attraction becomes even more stronger. So another piece of information can pass through the system because you have strengthened the bridge between the mind and the body. The physical organs will bring information that passes through the brain to the mind. The bridge is strengthened, and therefore the next one comes. And that process of nourishing the tanha, nourishing tanha by succession of thoughts, is called sayamsaro. It's called, in Sri Lankan language, it's called Samsara, but there are similar words used in other countries as well. Um, in Buddhism, Samsara is defined as something that goes from this birth to the next birth to the next birth to the next birth. But this actual Samsara happens within you every moment you have a thought. And so these three lokas always are bound together by a mechanism that it nourishes by itself. And that is what Samsara means. Sang means swayang, by itself. Sara means nourishing. So This process goes on and on and on as long as you are awake, and then in deep sleep you stop this process. But in light sleep, you see sometimes dreams, this process is partially active when things come from the memory. Although the sense organs are, five sense organs are inactive, the memory is still active and it sends in sort of a subconscious level. But you are in fact, theoretically, you are still awake, but not through the five senses. But you are not awake to the outside, you are awake inside. And you see dreams in that. So these are the processes that happen inside the system to hide the eye of Prajna, Buddha, and Dhamma. What therefore you need to do is to unleash this, open this up, break this cycle, so that mind becomes inactive. And then the new system called Chitta arises, which is the stepping stone to Prajna. So, first we have to understand what's happening, then understand what a thought is, how a thought is formed, and then we need to stop this. To stop that, you need to identify what the thought is, you should recognize it, and in this instance, just identifying an object. Forget about the good thoughts and the bad thoughts. We are talking about indifferent, neutral thought. That is also a thought. And recognize what are the components of this thought. It's the simplest thought. And if you take a tree or a house or a car, I saw that object. I saw a tree. I saw a car. So there are three components in that thought. It is me who saw it, and it is the object what you saw, and whether it was a process of seeing, touching, smelling, or hearing. Or I hear a sound or I saw a tree. So there are three components. And if you stop all these three components together, unfortunately you fall asleep. So you can't find anything. So what you need to do is to try and separate these components and still be awake. Like like holding a rope to cross the river. You just hold the rope and swing and use it as a swing and jump onto the other side and then let the rope go. Right? So you make use of the rope to get out from this mind to land on the other side. So what we do is we use seeing as the rope and drop I saw part. Sorry, I and the object, and hang on to the seeing part and temporarily train yourself so that you can be awake without having all three components, without considering any of those, dropping all three components. You are capable of being awake through a different system without a thought. And that's the practical part. So what you are really trying to do is to separate these components, drop two components, I and the object. Because the object is outside. The process of seeing happens inside. The seeing, the quality of seeing is inside you, whereas the object you saw is outside. So you separate them. Normally, when we see an object from outside, we don't separate them. We consider them, it's all mixed up. Seeing and the object are mixed up, and you perceive it as seeing the object, as one thing, one as into one basket. But here now we are separating the component of this basket and then try to be awake through seeing. Right now, you will ask how would you do that? What is the practical to do that? And I will explain that a bit later. And we you will now see what I describe and what the books describe and what the religion called Buddhism describe is something completely different, because we are going to completely in a path that's against the progress of a religion. Religion is based on me and how me and I should behave in the society, basically. That is assuming that there is outside, inside you have a me, and outside there is a boundary between me and you, and me and outside, and how we should behave. And that's not the Buddha message. The message is seeing Buddha, which is already there within you, hidden by this mind's activity, which has formed a religion and which has taken now us away into a completely entangled jungle, that we cannot unentangle anything while staying inside this forest or jungle. It's all like a ball of thread that's been entangled. It's very difficult to unentangle it. So what you have to do is to come out of that forest and start fresh, and then move in the opposite direction to understand Buddha and Dhamma, which is capable of being seen and found inside your body. So I will describe in detail what how this thought is formed, and there are some more detail that we can explain to you. Um, that is from the time it falls onto the eye until it falls onto the mind. I said these are called Rupa, Vedi, Sanya, Sankhya, Vijnana. Those are processes, not actual physical objects, processes, and that process is called Dukkha. So, do, when you have do in Magadhi language, which Buddha spoke, when you have do, it means it's something that's not good, bad. That doesn't take you where you want to go. So, dukkha means if that process happens, you will not see Buddha. You will see hear things outside. You will get a thought. So that is why it's called dukkha. And it is unfortunately translated in religions as suffering and something that is not very good, uh, unsatisfactory, and that sort of thing. It is what it ends up is unsatisfactory, but it is not suffering. Happiness also comes through the same system. Neutral ones also come through the same system. So therefore, it has given this word suffering has given them a incorrect meaning, misleading meaning to it. Dukkha means, kha means that is something that should be destroyed. Destroyed without remains. It's called share. Share means K H A Khay, like share, means it should be destroyed without remains. So dukkha means do. This process has to be destroyed without remains, because it doesn't take you to where you want to go to. You want to find out. It takes you to a thought. So, and also it's proclaimed to be the truth in Buddhism. Unfortunately, you have heard of Four Noble Truths, and one of this is dukkha. They have included this. Unfortunately, it is not the truth, it is the untruth that it goes to form at the end of this process called dukkha. So you will see that the meanings given to the words are not conducive to seeing Buddha in Buddhism. That is why nobody who followed Buddhism has seen Buddha for the last 2100 years. The Arahats are being recorded in the history only before that. So now this, when the image falls, it falls on the retina of the eye. Let's take the eye for example here, and the eye absorbs all the information that is brought from through the sense organs, through the medium of light, and then light doesn't pass any further from there, so it absorbs everything. It then forms a, a new image in its, in the way it knows how to form. Say, for example, a digital image from a ordinary picture, it forms something like that and passes that information through a nerve to the brain, and that information is called sanya. Sanya means a message. So first is a rupa. Rupa is the image that falls on the eye. Then vedi means acquiring knowledge at the retina level, and then it forms a message to be passed on to the brain. And the brain then elevates the speed of this sanya and projects it to the mind. And that is called, process called sankhya. Sankhya means making it numerous. So as it breaks up the image into more numerous smaller particles, what happens is the speed rises to the level of the mind speed. And then only the mind can understand. When it falls on the mind, the person becomes awake. And that's called vijnana. Not acquires knowledge, just becomes awake. So when you get up in the morning from deep sleep, you hear an alarm or something like that, you heard something, the alarm, the noise fell on the mind, and that message fell on the mind, and the mind then awakens, wakes up, and then asks the memory what it was, and the memory sends the impression back. You heard the alarm. So when you get up, you know that it was the alarm that was ringing at the time. So this process has to be stopped. And I today give you a little practical hint how to stop that, and then we will take questions from the audience. Now, what you need to practice is, first you know that the mind creates an illusion, so you want to get rid of the mind, and mind is always the troublemaker, the magician. That means it produces an illusion, something that it shows as if it is there, but it is not. It's not what it sees, not what it shows to be. So you must be ready to leave the mind behind. And the practical that we do to cling on to that part of seeing until we train ourselves is like this. You first, because there are lots of trees, we say look at a tree, but we can look at any object at a distance. Say about, if you can, about at least 50, 100 yards away, 100 meters away. And if you look at a tree, look at a branch that is not moving, preferably. And don't look at trees that you can identify easily, like most of the subcontinent have coconut trees. Don't look at them, you can identify them even from very far. So you look at this tree, and a tree that you cannot actually recognize as if it's a mango tree or any other tree. Um, and you look at the tree without trying to investigate that tree for about 10 seconds. And when you look at the tree, you know it's a tree. That's the first thought. You can't stop that. But after that, you stop thoughts by not investigating that. Normally, when you look at an object, we want to know. We investigate immediately. That is the way inherently we investigate. We look at the tree, we look at the leaves, we look at the way it is, we look at the fruit, and we know that's edible or not. And then we see whether it's ripe or not. We see the flowers and all sorts of things. All this information comes at once very quickly. But here we stop doing that. And 10 seconds, just blank. Keep looking at the tree. And after that, look at the space between the tree and the, excuse me, between the tree and you, the space. So you come out of this image. Basically, you are trying to drop the image with me, with I, with the notion of I, and leave only seeing, because you are seeing, but there is no object there in the space. You might see the trees behind, blurred like the other trees, not only the one you saw. That doesn't matter whether it's there or not. You're not focusing on that. You're focusing your eyes to a space which is without an object. And initially, when you look at the space, I might become a bit uncomfortable because I always like to see an image, but that will pass away after a few minutes or few seconds. So keep looking at this space for 10 minutes. That's all you need to do without thinking, without anything, and you will find if you do it properly, there is no me during that time. You don't realize it. Only after stopping, you realize that you didn't feel the time passing, or you didn't feel the notion of me or I during that time. And that time, you were awake through seeing only. So, to train yourself for later to even drop seeing and still be awake, we will discuss that on a later occasion. And so this is the part of the training. It's so simple. Look at the tree outside for about 10 seconds without investigating, or look at object at a distance, and then look at the space between you and that object, and focus on the space without the image. And leave only seeing, but don't go and say there, I am doing this, I am doing that. It has to be decided before, and it should happen automatically. Once you do 2-3 times, it will happen automatically. And then you will feel very relaxed at the end of that 10 minutes, very relaxed, light-headed, um, completely rejuvenated life if you actually do it properly. If you hear a noise during that time, it's only hearing, don't investigate it. If you get a thought from somewhere else, from your memory, just let it go. Don't even say it's my thought, I was disturbed. Let it go. Because the mind, when you leave, it always tries to send an image from memory to wake you up. Don't let me go. Don't leave me. That's what it's going to say. And so just ignore that. And after some time, mind will not bother you, and you can anytime you want when you are resting, you should be able to be awake without thinking by through seeing only for at least 2 to 3 minutes. And then you will find in your normal day-to-day life, if you get to that stage, when you're relaxed, without your knowledge, you go into that state, without doing the exercise, go into that state, and you sometimes have lapses of thought, particularly when you are resting, and that tells you that you are fairly well trained in that, and then you are ready to go to the next stage. Right, I'll stop the talk from there and take any questions if you have, please. We can't hear your voice.
Hi. Thank you, Doctor, for sharing us the Dharma session tonight. We will have a Q&A sessions. And the first questions from our audience.
Yes, the three methods to stop the mind from forming the illusion, and actually that is what I described at the end. Perhaps we must have sent that question before that. Um, Now, there is only one method I am showing because it is the easiest method. You can't use hearing to do that because sound is not there all the time. But for the eye, the object can be there all the time for you to train. So just use this. This is not a meditation, right? Meditation is you go into the mind and nourish the mind with an object, right? That is meditation. You see, if you go into the mind, it binds, it makes the body bind firmer to the mind through strengthening of tanha, the attraction between the two, because you have created a thought inside the mind. So this is not meditation. This is completely opposite. This is just trying to get out of the mind, and firstly through getting hold of seeing and training yourself to be awake only through seeing. So I have not heard and not found any other techniques that you can use hearing or touch or anything like that. But this is the easiest thing to do. So there is only one method that we train people on that, and it has been very successful. And remember, even Buddha also, you remember that there are gathas or verses in the books saying that he trained looking at a tree. There's a gatha called Patamam Bodhi Pallankang. That means first you your aim is to find Bodhi. That means knowledge. Then Dutyancham, that is second, Animittam. It should be it's translated as Anim Nisam, as if you have not you looked at a tree without blinking. But it is not the correct version. Correct version is Animittam. Nimitta is an image. So you look at a tree without an image. So you are trying to get out of the image. Nimitta means image, Animitta means without that image of the tree. So if it was good for him, I think it's good for us as well. It's much easier to do it that way. Human beings think by getting and accumulating things give happiness and success and become wanting animals. We keep looking, buying, getting, owning things, and so hard to be satisfied, therefore unhappy most of the time. Society become very material and selfish. People not keen on Dhamma. My comments. Yes, unfortunately, that's the way it is. That's what mind wants you to be, to hide it. Mind's function is to hide truth, and that's what mind wants you to be, and you have fallen for that. So most people think the mind is the greatest, and unfortunately, religions train you to train the mind. That is meditation, because while the more you train, the more illusion it creates, and further into the into the jungle, or into so-called suffering and dissatisfaction that you fall into. People don't realize how happy the state of Nibbana is. Nibbana is actually a state of happiness, and it is knowledge. And you will find that at the end, what we describe, knowledge is happiness. So, not knowing knowledge, knowledge itself is happiness, and that is where we are going at the end. So here you acquire illusion and you think you are happy at some stage, but invariably it changes into suffering or sorrow, unhappiness, and then you think this is part of our life. It is not. It is part of the illusion. The life is somewhere else. You can live much happily with knowledge. And this is exactly the message that we are spreading, that don't get fooled by your mind. Don't get taken away from these material benefits that you acquire during your life. Um, and at the end, when faced with death, you become very unhappy, very anxious. But if you find and if you have seen Buddha and Dhamma and seen in there is no person called me, you will not be afraid of death, because there is no person to die, and there was no person before who thought there was person. Actually, there wasn't. So you will, when time comes for you to leave, you will take it as it comes without feeling unhappy, frightened of death. Thank you. I see. Are there any more questions?
Hi, Doctor. There's no more question. Thank you, Doctor, for such a wonderful Dharma session tonight. On behalf of the monk and management of Mahavihara, we would like to thank Doctor for his time and sharing his Dharma knowledge with us. We would also like to express our gratitude to all our sponsors for their kind donations and all our audience for joining us tonight. Good night, everybody, and have a pleasant evening. Suki Hantu.
Thank you very much. Thank you.